Linda and his brother, Cookie, lived with their father and stepmother. Their mother had passed away long ago, and though their father loved them, he was weak against his new wife's demands. The stepmother never liked the boys. She often complained about them, saying they were a burden. She would whisper in her husband's ear, pushing him to send them away. At first, the father resisted, but over time, her words filled his heart with doubt. One day, he finally gave in. One morning, he called Linda and Cookie and said, "Let's go to the jungle to set traps." The boys were excited, thinking they would help bring food home. But Linda had a strange feeling. Something about the way their father spoke made him uneasy. So, before leaving, he secretly took a ball of thread and tied one end to a tree near their house. As they walked deeper into the forest, he let the thread unwind behind him, hoping it would lead them back if anything went wrong. When they reached a clearing, the father built a raised wooden platform called A.M. Sang. As the sun set, he sang a soft lullaby, helping the boys drift into sleep. But while they slept peacefully, their father quietly climbed down and walked away, leaving them alone in the dark jungle. When the boys woke up, the night was silent. The only sound was the rustling leaves and distant hoots of an owl. They called out, "Father, Father," but there was no answer. Cookie's voice trembled as he asked, "Where is he? Why did he leave us?" Linda took a deep breath, tried to stay calm. "Don't cry," he said. "I know how to get us back home. Follow me." With his thread leading the way, they retraced their steps and finally reached home. But when the stepmother saw them, her face turned red with anger. She confronted her husband, saying, "I told you to get rid of them. Either they leave, or I will." The father, caught between love for his children and fear of losing his wife, tried again. Each time he led them into the jungle, Linda found a way back. But their luck could not last forever. One day, the father took them even deeper into the forest, far beyond the places they had ever been. This time, Linda's thread was not long enough. When they woke up, they were truly lost. The trees stood tall around them like silent guards, their thick branches blocking the sunlight. The boys walked and walked, calling out for their father, but there was no answer. As the sun began to set, hunger gnawed at their stomachs. They searched for food and came across an abandoned field with a pile of hay. Desperately, they dug through it, hoping to find something to eat, but there was nothing. Just as Cookie was about to give up, Linda spotted something small, a single seed of Job's tears. It was barely enough for one, but without hesitation, they shared it. Though tiny, it was eaten with love, and for a moment, their hunger felt lighter. They kept walking until Linda noticed a large tree with a hornbill's nest high up in the branches. Without thinking, he climbed up and found eggs inside. He cracked one open and drank from it. The moment he swallowed, something strange happened. His arms and back began to sprout feathers. In shock, he realized he was changing. Understanding the magic of the eggs, he quickly dropped some down for Cookie, but as they hit the branches, most of them cracked, leaving only a small piece for him to taste. Cookie took a bite, but he felt an itch on his skin. He scratched and rubbed, shaking off the feathers that had begun to grow. Meanwhile, Linda had already transformed. He was no longer human. He had become a hornbill. Cookie stared in disbelief. "What will happen to me now?" he cried. Linda, now a bird, looked at his little brother with sadness and said, "Follow the shadow, follow the shadow." Cookie stood frozen as Linda's words echoed in his ears. "Follow the shadow, follow the shadow." But before he could respond, Linda flapped his wings and soared into the sky. Cookie reached out, but his brother was already high above, gliding between the treetops, his dark shadow moving over the forest floor. Desperate not to lose him, Cookie ran, trying to keep up. His eyes stayed locked on Linda's shadow, hoping it would lead him to safety. But the jungle was thick and the path was uneven. Vines twisted around his feet, branches scraped his arms, and the further he ran, the more he struggled. Soon his legs gave way, and he tripped into a bush. By the time he pulled himself free, the shadow was gone. Linda had disappeared. Cookie was now completely alone. Fear crept into his heart, but he refused to give up. He wiped his tears and kept walking, hoping to find his way out. Days passed, and hunger gnawed at him again. He scavenged whatever he could, wild berries, roots, and fallen fruits, anything that would keep him alive. The jungle felt endless, and loneliness became his only companion. But deep inside, he held on to hope. He knew he had to survive. One evening, after what felt like weeks of wandering, he spotted something in the distance, smoke rising between the trees. His heart raced. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. Gathering the last of his strength, he hurried towards it. As he pushed past the thick undergrowth, he found himself at the edge of a village. The villagers noticed the thin, tired boy emerging from the forest. His clothes were torn, his feet covered in scratches, and his face told the story of his struggle. Seeing his state, they took pity on him and welcomed him in. They gave him food, water, and a place to rest. Over time, he regained his strength and settled into the village. Years passed, and Cookie grew into a hard-working young man. His dedication and kindness earned him the respect of the people, and soon he became one of the wealthiest men in the village. With success came responsibility, and it was expected that he host a grand feast for the people, a tradition among the wealthiest. As he planned the feast, his heart ached for the brother he had lost. He longed to see Linda again, to know if he was still out there, flying across the skies. So, he decided to send an invitation to all the creatures of the forest. "Let every bird and beast know they are welcome," he told the villagers. A wild dove volunteered to carry the message, flying far and wide, calling out to the animals. On the day of the feast, the village filled with life. People gathered in excitement, and soon animals and birds began to arrive. Small ones, large ones, colorful ones, and plain ones. And then, through the vast sky, a shadow appeared. A great hornbill descended, landing at the heart of the celebration. Cookie's eyes widened as he recognized the bird. It was Linda. Forgetting everything else, he ran toward his brother. Linda, too, was overcome with emotion. In a moment of joy, he shook his feathers, and they scattered into the air. The villagers watched in amazement as the brothers reunited, bound by a love that even time and transformation could not break. From that day on, to honor their bond, the men of the village wore hornbill feathers on their headgear, a reminder that nothing is too small or too big to share when love is true. Once upon a time, in another village not far from where Cookie had settled, there lived a widow named Acola. She had a beautiful daughter whom she loved dearly. However, Acola also had a younger stepsister who had been left in her care after the death of their parents. Unlike her own daughter, Acola showed no affection for the young girl. She saw her as nothing more than a burden and treated her like a servant. While her own daughter was pampered with the finest clothes and food, the stepsister was forced to do all the household chores. No matter how hard she worked, Acola never showed her kindness or appreciation. One morning, Acola handed the girl a clay pot and ordered her to fetch water from the well. "Go now, and don't come back until the pot is full," she said sternly. The girl obeyed without complaint, as she always did. The well was far, and the journey was tiring, but she kept walking. When she finally reached the well, she sat on the edge to rest for a moment. As she wiped the sweat from her forehead, she noticed an old woman approaching. The woman's clothes were tattered, her feet dusty from the long road. "Dear child," the woman said softly, "would you be kind enough to give me a drink of water?" Without hesitation, the girl lowered her pot into the well, filled it, and handed it to the woman. "Here, take as much as you need," she said with a gentle smile. The old woman drank deeply, sighing in relief. She then looked at the girl and said, "Your kindness has touched my heart. I am not just an old woman. I am a fairy. Because of your good heart, I will give you a gift. From now on, whenever you speak, golden flowers will fall from your mouth." The girl was shocked, but thanked the fairy humbly. As she turned to leave, she decided to test the fairy's words. "What a beautiful day," she whispered to herself. To her amazement, tiny golden coins and fresh, fragrant flowers fell from her lips. She gasped in wonder, but instead of being greedy, she simply smiled and continued her way home. When she arrived, Acola saw her and, as always, barely paid attention to her. "Where have you been all this time?" she demanded. As the girl opened her mouth to explain, gold and flowers spilled onto the floor. Akola's eyes widened in shock. She forgot her anger and stared at the treasures. "Where did this come from?" she asked in disbelief. The girl honestly told her what had happened, thinking Akola would be pleased. But instead, Akola's mind raced with greed. "If my stepsister can receive such a gift, then my daughter should receive an even greater one," she thought. That night, she instructed her daughter to go to the well the next morning and do exactly as her stepsister had done. The next day, Akola's daughter made the journey to the well, but unlike her stepsister, she was not kind-hearted. When she arrived, she too met the old woman, who once again asked for a drink of water. But instead of helping, the girl frowned and said, "If you are thirsty, get your own water. Do I look like your servant?" The old woman's eyes darkened, and her voice grew stern. "You are ungrateful and selfish," she said. "If kindness brings rewards, then cruelty brings punishment. From now on, whenever you speak, snakes and toads will fall from your mouth." The girl scoffed, thinking it was nonsense, and walked back home. But the moment she entered the house and spoke, a snake slithered out of her mouth, followed by a toad. She screamed, but each cry brought forth more creatures. Akola was horrified. She tried everything to make it stop, but nothing worked. The curse had taken hold. Finally, Akola realized her mistake. She had been cruel and selfish, thinking only of wealth and beauty. But kindness, she now understood, was far more valuable. From that day forward, she changed her ways, treating her stepniece with respect and care. Though her own daughter carried her punishment forever, Akola hoped that, in time, she too would learn the lesson that true kindness shines brightest when it expects nothing in return.